A woman who had not felt God's presence in 7 years spoke 3 words at 3 in the morning, and by sunrise her faith was restored so completely that her priest could not explain what he witnessed. She had prayed every single day through those 7 years. She had never stopped attending Mass, but something had been missing. An intermediary figure who had spent 30 years in spiritual direction revealed the words. The words came from Pope John Paul II. Her name was Patricia Ann Morrison. She was 68 years old. She lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She had been a daily communicant for 42 years. She had served as a catechist for 31 years. She had led Bible study groups in 3 parishes. She had completed 4 directed retreats. She had prayed the rosary every single morning without exception since 1981. And yet for 7 years she had felt absolutely nothing when she prayed. No consolation, no peace, no sense that anyone was listening. She knelt before the Blessed Sacrament and felt like she was kneeling before silence. She went to confession and left, feeling exactly as empty as when she arrived. She prayed for her daughter who had left the church and felt her prayers dissolve into nothing. She woke every morning at 5 to pray, and by 5:15 she was staring at the wall, wondering if God had abandoned her, or if she had done something so terrible that he would never come back. Her spiritual director told her this was the dark night of the soul. Her pastor told her to persevere in faith. She persevered. The darkness stayed. She began to wonder if she had been praying wrong her entire life. She began to wonder if she had ever truly known God at all, or if everything she had felt before those 7 years had been her own imagination. She did not tell anyone how deep the doubt had become. She smiled at Mass. She continued teaching catechism. And every single night she lay in bed terrified that she would die in this darkness and discover she had never belonged to him. The intermediary figure who would find Patricia Morrison was a priest named Father David Michael Harris. He had been a diocesan priest in the Archdiocese of Detroit for 33 years. He had served as spiritual director to over 200 souls. He had spent 6 years studying the writings of Pope John Paul II at the Pontifical John Paul II Institute. Pope John Paul II wrote in his apostolic letter Novo Millennio Ineunte that the Church must teach the faithful how to pray in a way that sustains them through spiritual dryness and through the silence of God, because every soul that perseveres in faith will pass through periods where God seems absent. Father Harris came to understand through Pope John Paul II's documented teachings on prayer that there are specific words given by Christ himself that restore faith when doubt has made prayer impossible. You have knelt in your room and felt like you were praying to an empty ceiling. You have gone to Mass and received communion and felt absolutely nothing, and wondered if something inside you was broken beyond repair. You have prayed for someone you love with every ounce of sincerity you possess, and watched your prayers seem to accomplish nothing and started to doubt whether your prayers have ever done anything at all. The error you have been making is not a failure of faith. It is this: you have been trying to restore your own faith through your own effort. You have been praying harder, longer, with more discipline, with more sacrifice. But faith is not restored by effort. Faith is restored by receiving what Christ spoke directly into the moment of doubt. You were never taught that there are specific words he gave for this exact moment, words that Pope John Paul II documented, words that when spoken at the moment when doubt feels unbearable will allow God to do what you cannot do for yourself. Father Harris had also walked through a period where his faith felt like it had disappeared. It began in the winter of 1997. He was 51 years old. He had been a priest for 18 years. He woke one morning in the rectory in Dearborn and realized he could not feel God anymore. He celebrated Mass that morning and felt like he was saying words that meant nothing. He heard confessions that afternoon and felt like a fraud. He had always believed that if a priest lost his faith, God would strike him down or remove him from ministry. God did neither. The silence continued. He prayed the liturgy of the hours every day. The silence continued. He prayed before the Blessed Sacrament for an hour every evening. The silence continued. He began to feel a terror he had never known. He thought about leaving the priesthood. He thought about asking for a leave of absence. He told no one. He continued his duties. And every morning when he vested for Mass, he whispered the same prayer. Lord, I do not feel you, but I will serve you anyway. It was the only honest thing he could say. One evening in March of 1998, he was alone in the church after Stations of the Cross. He knelt in the dark before the tabernacle. He said out loud, I do not know if you are there. I do not know if you have ever been there. I am afraid I have wasted my entire life. The moment he said those words, he felt something break open inside his chest. Not peace, not consolation, a memory. He remembered reading something Pope John Paul II had written about the apostles in the boat during the storm. He went back to the rectory and found the passage. It was in one of the Holy Father's Wednesday audiences from 1994. Pope John Paul II said this: "When the apostles cried out to Christ in the storm, they did not cry out with faith. They cried out with doubt. And Christ did not rebuke them for doubting. He calmed the storm first. Then he asked, 'Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?' He restored the conditions for faith before he asked them to have faith." Father Harris read that passage 11 times that night. He understood. He had been trying to generate faith by willpower, but faith is a gift, and when the gift feels absent, there are words Christ gave that create the conditions for the gift to return. Father Harris found those words in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verse 24. A father brings his son to Jesus. The father says, "I believe, help my unbelief." Those 6 words, spoken by a man who was desperate and doubting, moved Christ to heal his son. Pope John Paul II wrote that these words are the most honest prayer a soul can offer when faith has gone dark. Father Harris spoke those words that night. "I believe, help my unbelief." He felt nothing immediately. He went to bed. He woke the next morning and realized something had shifted. He could not name what it was, but the terror was gone. He celebrated Mass that morning, and halfway through the Eucharistic prayer, he began to weep. He felt God again, not as he had felt him before, differently, deeper. He understood that the 7 months of silence had not been abandonment. They had been preparation. And the words he had spoken, "I believe, help my unbelief," had been the hinge on which everything turned. Within 3 weeks, he felt called to share this with others. He began to ask in spiritual direction sessions if the person had ever experienced a period where prayer felt completely dry. Almost everyone said yes. He began to teach them the words, and he began to document what happened. Father Harris first met Patricia Morrison in the spring of 2006. She had requested spiritual direction after her regular director had retired. They met in a small room beside the parish office in Grand Rapids on a Tuesday afternoon in April. Patricia sat across from Father Harris and said, "I need to tell you something I have never said out loud. I do not think I believe in God anymore." She said it without crying. She said it like someone confessing a medical diagnosis. Father Harris asked her how long she had felt this way. She said 7 years. He asked her if she had stopped praying. She said no. She prayed every single day. She went to Mass every single Sunday and on most weekdays. She had never missed her morning rosary, but she felt nothing, absolutely nothing. Father Harris leaned forward and said something that Patricia would later say changed everything. He said, "You have been trying to pray your way out of doubt, but Christ did not give us prayer to escape doubt. He gave us specific words to speak into doubt so that he can restore what we cannot restore ourselves." Patricia looked at him and said, "What words?" Father Harris opened his Bible to the Gospel of Mark. He read her the passage about the father who brought his son to Jesus. He read the father's words, "I believe, help my unbelief." He looked at Patricia and said, "These are the words Pope John Paul II said are the most powerful prayer a soul can offer when faith feels dead. Not because the words create faith, but because the words create the space for Christ to do what only He can do." Patricia stared at the passage. She said, "That is all?" Father Harris said, "That is everything. Speak these words tonight when the doubt feels unbearable. Do not try to feel anything. Do not try to generate faith. Just speak the words and let Christ do the rest." Patricia agreed. She would try that night. If you are still watching this moment, it is because you recognize yourself in Patricia Morrison. You recognize the years of praying and feeling nothing. You recognize the fear that maybe you were never truly His. Say this now, not to me, not to this message, but to Him. I am still here, I am still listening, and I am ready to receive what I have never known. That declaration is the beginning of everything that follows. Patricia Morrison went home that Tuesday evening to her small house on the east side of Grand Rapids. She made dinner, she cleaned the kitchen, she sat in her living room and tried to read. At 10:30 she went to her bedroom. She knelt beside her bed as she had done every night for 42 years. She opened her Bible to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verse 24. She read the Father's words silently first, then she spoke them out loud. "I believe. Help my unbelief." Her voice sounded strange in the empty room. She felt nothing, no warmth, no peace, no sense that anyone had heard. She spoke the words again. "I believe. Help my unbelief." Still nothing. She stayed on her knees. She did not try to pray anything else. She did not try to feel anything. She just knelt there in the silence, holding those 6 words. After 10 minutes, she got into bed. She lay in the dark. She whispered the words one more time. "I believe, help my unbelief." She fell asleep. She woke at 3 in the morning. She did not know why. The room was completely dark. She felt a weight on her chest. Not physical pain, something else. She sat up. She spoke the words again into the darkness. "I believe, help my unbelief." And then something happened that she would later describe to Father Harris as the most overwhelming experience of her entire life. She felt the presence of God so powerfully that she could barely breathe. Not as an emotion, not as a thought, as a presence. She began to weep. She had not cried in 7 years. She wept so hard she could not stop. She knelt beside her bed again and she said out loud, "You are here. You have always been here. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry I doubted you." She stayed on her knees until sunrise. When she stood, her legs were shaking. She looked at the clock. It was 6:15. She had been on her knees for over 3 hours. She had not felt the time pass. She called Father Harris that morning. She could barely speak. She said, "It happened, he came back, or I came back, I do not know which, but he is here." Father Harris asked her what she had done. She said, "I spoke the words. I believed. Help my unbelief." And he answered. On the 3rd day after that night, Patricia woke without the heaviness that had been pressing on her chest every morning for 7 years. On the 7th day, her daughter called her. They had not spoken in 4 months. Her daughter said, "Mom, I do not know why I am calling. I just felt like I needed to talk to you." They talked for 2 hours. On the 14th day, Patricia went to confession. She confessed the doubt. She confessed the years of feeling abandoned. And when the priest gave her absolution, she felt it. She felt forgiven. She felt held. She left the confessional and knelt in the church and said the words again. "I believe. Help my unbelief." She said them with gratitude this time, not with desperation, with gratitude. 6 months later, she wrote a letter to Father Harris. She said, "I do not know what those words did, but I know that I am not the same woman who spoke them the first time. My faith is not what it was before the 7 years of darkness. It is stronger, because now I know that even when I cannot feel him, he is holding me. And when I speak those words, he reminds me." There was a woman named Margaret Rose Callahan from Portland, Oregon. She was 71 years old. She had been a secular Franciscan for 23 years. She had prayed the Liturgy of the Hours every single day since 1979. In the fall of 2003, her husband of 48 years died suddenly of a heart attack. She held his hand in the hospital as he died. She went home that night and tried to pray. She could not. She opened her breviary the next morning. The words meant nothing. She attended his funeral mass. She received communion. She felt nothing. She thought the grief would pass and her faith would return. The grief passed. Her faith did not return. For 2 years, she continued all her practices. She attended daily mass. She prayed her breviary. She met with her Franciscan community, and she felt absolutely nothing. She began to think that God had taken her husband and her faith at the same time. A visiting priest came to her parish in November of 2005 to give a retreat on the spirituality of Pope John Paul II. Margaret attended. The priest spoke about the Holy Father's teaching on suffering and perseverance. He said that Pope John Paul II had written that there are moments in the spiritual life when God allows the soul to feel completely abandoned, so that the soul learns to trust not in feelings, but in his promises. The priest said that in those moments there are specific words Christ gave that restore the capacity to trust. He read the passage from Mark chapter 9, verse 24. "I believe. Help my unbelief." He said, "If you are in a place right now where your faith feels dead, speak these words tonight. Do not wait for feeling. Speak the words and let him meet you there." Margaret went home that night. She knelt in the bedroom she had shared with her husband. She spoke the words, "I believe, help my unbelief." She felt nothing. She spoke them again the next night. Still nothing. On the third night she spoke the words, and then she said out loud, "Lord, I do not know if you are listening, but I am going to keep speaking these words until you answer or until I die." On the 7th night she woke at 2 in the morning. She heard her husband's voice, not audibly but clearly. He said, "Maggie, I am with him, and he is with you. You have to trust that." She sat up in bed. She said out loud, "I believe. Help my unbelief." And for the first time in 2 years, she felt peace. Not happiness, peace. A deep, unshakable peace that did not depend on what she felt. Within 3 weeks, she could pray again. Within 2 months, she returned to leading her Franciscan community. She said later, "Those words did not bring my husband back, but they brought me back, and I know now that my faith does not depend on whether I feel close to God. It depends on whether I am willing to say, 'I believe,' even when everything in me wants to say, 'I do not.'" There was a man named Thomas Edward Bennett from Omaha, Nebraska. He was 64 years old. He had been a deacon for 11 years. In 2008, he was accused falsely of financial misconduct in his parish. The accusation was investigated. He was cleared completely. But the damage was done. Half the parish believed the accusation. He was asked quietly to step down from active ministry until the situation calmed. He agreed. He thought it would take a few months. It took 3 years. During those 3 years, he continued to pray. He continued to attend Mass. But he felt betrayed by the church he had served. He felt abandoned by God. He stopped believing that his prayers mattered. A priest who had known him for 20 years visited him in the spring of 2011. The priest asked him how he was praying. Thomas said, "I am not. I go through the motions, but I do not believe it anymore." The priest asked him if he had ever read what Pope John Paul II wrote about the prayer of a soul in darkness. Thomas said no. The priest opened his Bible and read him the words from Mark chapter 9. I believe, help my unbelief. The priest said, this is the prayer of a man who was desperate and doubting, and Christ healed his son because of it. Speak these words every night for 1 week. Do not expect to feel anything, just speak them and see what happens. Thomas spoke the words that night. He spoke them with anger. I believe, help my unbelief. He spoke them the second night with less anger. By the 5th night, he was speaking them with tears. On the 7th night, he spoke the words, and then he said, Lord, I do not know if I still have faith, but I know I want to. 2 weeks later, he was invited back to active ministry. The pastor who had asked him to step down apologized publicly. Thomas returned, and he said later, I did not realize how much my faith had depended on being affirmed by others. When that was taken away, I had nothing left. Those 6 words taught me that faith is not about what I feel or what others think of me. It is about what Christ does when I admit I cannot do it myself. The pattern across these 3 lives is unmistakable. A soul reaches the point where prayer feels impossible and faith feels dead. The soul speaks the words Christ gave to a doubting father. I believe. Help my unbelief. And within days or weeks, Christ restores what the soul could not restore through any amount of effort or discipline. This is not coincidence. This is the documented reality of what happens when you stop trying to generate faith on your own and instead speak the words that create the space for him to act. Pope John Paul II understood something about doubt that most spiritual teachers miss. He understood that doubt is not the opposite of faith. Doubt is the condition in which faith is tested and purified. In his apostolic letter, Salvifici Doloris, written in 1984, he wrote that suffering and spiritual darkness are not signs that God has abandoned the soul. They are signs that God is preparing the soul to receive a deeper knowledge of his presence. The Holy Father knew this personally. After the assassination attempt in 1981, he spent months recovering in the hospital. He later wrote that during those months he experienced periods of profound spiritual darkness. He could not pray as he had prayed before. He could not feel God's presence as he had felt it before. But he did not stop praying. He prayed differently. He prayed the prayers of those who doubt. And he discovered that Christ meets the soul most powerfully, not when the soul is strong, but when the soul admits it is weak. The words, I believe, help my unbelief, are recorded in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verse 24. A father brings his possessed son to Jesus. The disciples could not cast out the demon. The father says to Jesus, if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Jesus says, if you can. All things are possible for one who believes. And the father cries out immediately, I believe, help my unbelief. Pope John Paul II wrote in a 1994 general audience that this father's cry is the most honest prayer in all of Scripture because it names both realities at once. The soul believes and the soul doubts. And Christ does not wait for the doubt to disappear before he acts. He acts in response to the honesty. The words, I believe, help my unbelief, do exactly what the title of this message promised. They restore faith not because the words are magic, but because the words create the exact conditions Christ requires to do what only he can do. You speak the words when doubt feels unbearable, and he responds by doing what you cannot do for yourself. He restores your capacity to trust, your capacity to hope, your capacity to feel his presence again. In the gospel passage, the Father's Son is healed immediately after the Father speaks those words. Pope John Paul II taught that every soul is like that Father. We bring our brokenness to Christ. We admit we cannot fix it ourselves. We say, I believe, help my unbelief, and he heals what we bring. This is why these 6 words, when spoken in the moment of deepest doubt, produce the result the title promised. Because they are not your words. They are the words Christ himself placed in Scripture so that every doubting soul in every generation would know exactly what to say when faith feels dead. Before you speak these words tonight, there are two things that would block the result even if you speak the words correctly. The first blockage is this: you have been treating doubt as a sin. You have been confessing doubt. You have been asking God to forgive you for doubting. And every time you do that, you push him further away because you are telling him that doubt disqualifies you from his love. It does not. Doubt is not a sin. Doubt is a cry for help. Pope John Paul II wrote that the saints who experienced the deepest union with God were often the same saints who experienced the most terrible doubt. Saint Therese of Lisieux, Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Saint John of the Cross. Their doubt did not separate them from God. Their honesty about their doubt brought them closer to him. There was a woman named Susan Marie Kowalski from Buffalo, New York. She was 66 years old. She had been a daily communicant for 39 years. In 2009, she began to experience severe anxiety every time she went to confession. She was confessing the same thing every single week. Father, I have doubted God's goodness. I have doubted that he hears my prayers. I have doubted that he loves me. Her confessor kept telling her to trust more, but she could not. The doubt kept coming back. She began to think she was committing a sin that could not be forgiven. A visiting priest gave a talk at her parish in the fall of 2010 about Pope John Paul II's writings on the dark night of the soul. The priest said, "Doubt is not a sin you confess. Doubt is a pain you bring to Christ." Susan felt something break open inside her when she heard that. She went to confession the next week. She said, "Father, I am doubting, and I am not asking you to forgive me for it. I am asking you to pray with me that Christ will help me." The priest paused. Then he said, "That is the most honest confession I have heard in 20 years. He taught her the words from Mark chapter 9, "I believe, help my unbelief." He told her to speak those words every time the doubt came, instead of treating the doubt like a failure. Susan spoke the words that night. She spoke them the next morning. She spoke them every single time the anxiety rose. Within 2 weeks, the anxiety began to lift. Within a month, she stopped confessing doubt as a sin. She said later, "I wasted years thinking God was disappointed in me for doubting. I did not know that my doubt was the exact place where he wanted to meet me." If you have been confessing doubt, stop. Doubt is not your sin. Doubt is your invitation. Tonight, before you speak the words, say this out loud. "Lord, I am not asking you to forgive me for doubting. I am asking you to meet me in my doubt." That removes the first blockage. The second blockage is this: you have been waiting to feel something before you trust that he has heard you. You speak a prayer. You wait for peace. You wait for consolation. You wait for a sign. And when you feel nothing, you assume the prayer did not work. Pope John Paul II wrote in his encyclical Redemptoris Mater that Mary's faith was not based on what she felt. It was based on what God promised. When the angel told her she would bear the Son of God, she did not feel ready. She did not feel worthy. She said yes anyway, and her yes was enough. There was a woman named Helen Ruth Daniels from Raleigh, North Carolina. She was 69 years old. She had been praying for her son to return to the church for 14 years. He had left the faith in his 20s. He was now 41. She had prayed novenas. She had attended healing masses. She had offered her communions for him. And nothing had changed. In 2012, she attended a retreat where a priest spoke about the prayer of a doubting soul. The priest read the words from Mark chapter 9. "I believe, help my unbelief." He said, "Do not wait to feel that your prayer has been heard. Trust that it has been heard. And let God work in his time, not yours." Helen went home and spoke those words that night. I believe. Help my unbelief. She felt nothing. She spoke them the next night. Still nothing. But instead of interpreting the lack of feeling as a sign that God was not listening, she kept speaking the words. She spoke them every night for 6 weeks. On the 43rd night, her son called her. He said, "Mom, I do not know why I am calling, but I have been thinking about going back to Mass. Would you come with me?" They went to Mass together the following Sunday. It was the first time he had been inside a church in 14 years. Helen said later, "I spent 14 years waiting to feel that my prayers were working. The moment I stopped waiting to feel and started trusting that He heard me, everything changed." If you have been waiting to feel something before you trust that God has heard you, stop waiting. Speak the words tonight. And trust that He has heard you whether you feel it or not. That removes the second blockage. You know what it feels like to kneel in prayer and feel like you are praying to silence. You know what it feels like to wonder if God has forgotten you. You know what it feels like to question whether your faith was ever real or whether you imagined the entire thing. And now you know something else. You know that the solution is not to pray harder. It is not to try to feel more. The solution is to speak the 6 words Christ gave to a doubting father and let Him do what you cannot do for yourself. Pope John Paul II walked through spiritual darkness in the final years of his life. His body failed, his voice weakened, he could barely celebrate Mass. And yet he continued because he understood that faith is not a feeling. Faith is a decision to say yes to God, even when every feeling says no. He prayed through suffering, he prayed through silence, and he left the words that would help every soul who doubts know exactly what to say when prayer feels impossible. What will your life look like 6 months from now if you do not speak these words tonight? Will you still be kneeling in the same silence, wondering if He hears you, wondering if you have been praying wrong your entire life? What will happen to the people you love if your prayers remain blocked by the doubt you have never named out loud? How many graces are waiting for them that can only come through you when you finally admit that you believe and you need help with your unbelief? And when you stand before Him and He asks you what you did with the knowledge you received tonight, what will you say? Will you tell Him you were afraid to speak 6 words because you were not sure they would work? Or will you tell Him that you spoke the words even though you doubted, and that your speaking was enough for Him to restore what you could not restore yourself? Pope John Paul II is with you in this moment. He knows exactly what it feels like to pray and feel nothing. He knows what it feels like to serve God faithfully and wonder if God is even there. And He left these words specifically for you, for this moment, for tonight. There is a sequence to what you are about to receive. The complete action that the title promised is not complicated, but it must be done exactly as it is given here. Pope John Paul II documented this in his teaching on the necessity of praying Scripture not as information, but as conversation with God. The words, "I believe, help my unbelief," are not a formula. They are a cry. And Christ responds to the cry when it is spoken with complete honesty in the moment when faith feels impossible. This is what you do tonight. You wait until the moment when the doubt feels unbearable. Do not try to do this when you are calm. Do not try to do this as part of your regular prayer routine. Wait until the moment when you are lying in bed or kneeling in your room and the thought comes again. The thought that says, "God is not listening. He has never been listening." You have wasted your entire life praying to someone who is not there. When that thought comes, do not fight it. Do not try to replace it with a more faithful thought. Let it be there. And then speak these 6 words out loud into the darkness of your room. I believe. Help my unbelief. Say them exactly as they are written. Do not add anything. Do not explain anything. Do not try to make them sound more eloquent or more faithful. Just say them. I believe. Help my unbelief. If you feel nothing, say them again. I believe. Help my unbelief. If you still feel nothing, do not interpret that as failure. Stay on your knees or stay in your bed and say them one more time. I believe. Help my unbelief. Then stop. Do not keep repeating them endlessly. 3 times is enough. After you have spoken the words 3 times, say one more sentence. Say this: Lord, I have spoken the words you gave to the doubting father. I trust that you have heard me, and I will wait for you to do what only you can do. Then go to sleep. Do not lie awake waiting for something to happen. Do not analyze whether you felt anything. Go to sleep. When you wake in the morning, speak the words again before you do anything else, before you check your phone, before you get out of bed, before you begin your morning prayers. Speak the words, I believe. Help my unbelief. Do this every morning for 7 days. Speak the words at night when the doubt feels unbearable. Speak them in the morning when you wake. 7 days. When you speak these words, when doubt feels unbearable and God will restore your faith, this is what happens. You create the exact conditions Christ requires to meet you where you are and restore what you thought was lost forever. The faith he restores will not feel the same as the faith you had before the doubt came. It will be stronger, deeper, because it will no longer depend on what you feel. It will depend only on what he has promised, and his promises do not change. On the 3rd day, write down one thing you notice that is different. Do not look for a dramatic experience. Look for something small. A moment during Mass when you felt present instead of distracted. A moment during your rosary when one Hail Mary felt like it went somewhere instead of dissolving into nothing. Write it down. On the 7th day, go to confession if you have been avoiding it. Confess whatever you need to confess. And after you receive absolution, kneel in the church and speak the words one more time. I believe. Help my unbelief. Not because you still doubt, but because you are grateful. You are declaring that belief and doubt can coexist and that Christ meets you in both. Tonight you will do exactly what Patricia Morrison did on that Tuesday night in April of 2006. You will kneel beside your bed. You will open your Bible to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verse 24. You will read the Father's words silently, then you will speak them out loud. I believe. Help my unbelief. You will not wait for a feeling. You will not wait for peace. You will speak the words, and you will trust that he has heard you. Pope John Paul II believed that when a soul speaks these words with complete honesty, Christ responds immediately, not always with consolation, but always with his presence. The soul may not feel the presence for days or weeks, but the presence is there, working, healing, restoring. You will do this tonight because you cannot go another night carrying the weight of doubt alone. You will do this because you are ready to stop trying to fix your faith and let him restore it. Say this now, not to me, but to him. I am ready. I will speak the words tonight, and I will trust that you have heard me even if I feel nothing. That is your commitment, and it is enough. You will speak the words at the same hour Patricia Morrison spoke them. Between 10 and 11 tonight, you will kneel in the same posture she knelt, beside your bed or in the quietest room in your home. You will speak the words 3 times. You will go to sleep, and you will wake tomorrow morning and speak them again before you do anything else. For 7 mornings, this is not a suggestion. This is what you will do if you want the result the title promised. Pope John Paul II believed that a soul who speaks these words with complete sincerity for 7 consecutive days will experience a restoration of faith so profound that the soul will never again believe that God has abandoned them. Not because they will never doubt again, but because they will know what to say when the doubt comes, and they will know that he always answers. What you have just received is too important to keep to yourself. Someone in your life needs to hear this tonight. A woman in your parish who has been suffering from the same doubt you have carried. She prays every day. She attends Mass every week. and she feels absolutely nothing. She has told you in a quiet moment after Mass that something feels wrong. She does not know what, but she feels farther from God now than she has ever felt. She needs these words. A daughter or granddaughter who has told you that her prayers feel blocked, that she goes to confession and feels no different when she leaves, that she is starting to wonder if any of it is real. She needs these words. A friend who has been in so much spiritual pain for so long that she has stopped praying for herself and only prays for others because she does not believe God listens to her anymore. She needs these words. Sharing this message is not about growing a channel, it is about passing on what the church has always passed on. Grace, from one faithful soul to the next. You received this tonight because someone else spoke it into existence. Now you speak it forward. May the Father, who never abandons you even when you cannot feel him, the Son who gave you the exact words to speak when faith feels dead, and the Holy Spirit, who is restoring your capacity to trust right now in this moment, bless you and hold you through every doubt you will ever face. May Pope John Paul II, who walked through spiritual darkness and never stopped believing, intercede for you tonight as you kneel and speak the words. He spent his entire pontificate helping souls discover. When you speak these words with complete honesty tonight, Christ will meet you exactly where you are, and he will restore,